A seismic shift is happening on America's northern border, a profound and historic rupture in a relationship once defined by its stability. Quick pause, subscribe, comment, and share to support us. For decades, this was the world's longest, most peaceful, and busiest international boundary. Now, an unnerving quiet has fallen, and almost no one is paying attention. It began quietly, then all at once. A slow-burning fire of diplomatic friction that suddenly erupted into a full-blown economic crisis. In February 2025, the number of Canadians traveling to the United States plummeted by a staggering 40% in a single month. This was not a statistical blip or a seasonal adjustment. It was a cliff-edge event, a sudden, sharp economic shockwave. The collapse is a direct response, a clear signal that America's closest ally and largest trading partner has reached a breaking point. Years of unpredictable trade policies and inflammatory rhetoric are now manifesting in tangible, painful economic consequences that are just beginning to be felt across the United States. The numbers paint a stark and troubling picture, one that goes far beyond simple economics and into the realm of national identity and sentiment. A recent poll in March found an overwhelming 62% of Canadians now intend to avoid traveling to the United States for the next year. This isn't just hurt feelings, it's a conscious, collective decision. It represents a potential $4 billion annual loss for the American tourism industry alone. For perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of some small nations, wiped from the balance sheets of American businesses. Hotels, restaurants, and retail shops in border communities are already feeling the chill as their most reliable customers vanish. These are businesses built on the simple premise of a friendly, open border, a premise that is now collapsing. If you want to understand the real-world impact of these high-level political battles, make sure to subscribe, comment with your thoughts, and share this analysis. So, how did we get here? This growing estrangement is the direct result of a confrontational approach that has treated an ally like an adversary. The Trump administration's imposition of steep 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, justified under the unbelievable pretext of national security, was the first major blow. This was followed by public musings about annexing Canada as the 51st state. What was dismissed by some in the U.S. as political theater was received in Canada as a profound insult. It did more than just strain diplomatic ties. It fundamentally altered how ordinary Canadians see the United States. They are now voting with their wallets and their passports, choosing to spend their money elsewhere in countries where they feel their business and their nationhood is respected. But this is more than just a consumer boycott. Behind the scenes, the Canadian government is methodically preparing for a future without traditional reliance on the American market. According to sources in Ottawa, detailed contingency plans are being drawn up for a potential withdrawal from the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, CUSMA, as it's known in Canada. This isn't a bluff. It is a calculated strategic pivot led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, a former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. He is an economist by training, known for his data-driven, unsentimental approach to policy. For years, Carney has been quietly building a network of alternative economic partnerships, strengthening trade ties with the European Union and the Asia-Pacific. Canada is signaling, if the United States wants a trade war, it will find its northern neighbor unexpectedly prepared, with new alliances already in place. The message from Ottawa is clear. The era of taking Canada for granted is over. The entire $1.6 trillion trade ecosystem that binds the North American continent together now hangs precariously in the balance. The focal point of this impending crisis is the mandatory review of the CUSMA trade deal scheduled for July 1, 2026. This is not a routine check-in. Under the terms of the agreement that Donald Trump himself championed as a signature achievement, this review gives each member nation, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the power to demand renegotiations, renew the pact, or signal its intent to withdraw entirely. What was designed as a stability mechanism has now become a high-stakes trigger for economic disintegration, threatening to unravel decades of integrated supply chains. The irony is inescapable. The very deal that President Trump once touted as one of his greatest accomplishments is now on life support, largely due to his own administration's actions. The real-world consequences of this uncertainty are already devastating American border towns. From the remote community of Haines, Alaska, which is geographically dependent on road access through Canada, to the bustling border cities in New York and Michigan, the story is the same. Local leaders are sounding the alarm, warning that the economic fabric of their communities is tearing apart. Canadians, who once crossed the border daily or weekly to shop, dine, vacation, are now staying home. This economic pain is being deliberately amplified by new, restrictive policies. In April 2025, the Trump administration implemented a new rule requiring Canadians staying in the United States for more than 30 days to register with authorities and be fingerprinted. This move effectively treats citizens of a close ally like potential security threats, creating a bureaucratic and psychological barrier to travel and commerce. Business travelers are canceling trips, and families are choosing European destinations over American ones. The central question now is whether Canada will formally decide to walk away from CUSMA on July 1st, 2026, severing a trade relationship that supports millions of jobs and defines the economic landscape of an entire continent. While the Trump administration was busy waging a trade war under its America First doctrine, imposing tariffs and threatening long-standing allies, Canada was quietly executing a brilliant and necessary strategic pivot. Faced with unprecedented volatility from its largest trading partner, Ottawa realized that the old certainties of North American trade were gone. The response wasn't a war of words, but a calculated, behind-the-scenes campaign of economic and diplomatic realignment. The primary objective was to fundamentally reorient its economic and diplomatic future away from its volatile southern neighbor. The cornerstone of this new architecture is a deepened, multifaceted relationship with the European Union, a bloc of 450 million people. This wasn't just about finding new customers. It was about anchoring Canada to a stable, predictable, and like-minded global power. The masterstroke came when Prime Minister Mark Carney finalized Canada's entry into the EU's €244 billion PESCO Safe Defence Programme. This move, which allows Canada to participate in joint European military projects, was a geopolitical masterclass. It was a clear signal that Canada was ready to invest in the security of the transatlantic alliance, independent of Washington's whims. This move was far more than a simple military procurement deal. It was a powerful statement of strategic alignment. It positioned Canada as a trusted and essential partner to Europe at the very moment the continent was questioning America's reliability and commitment to NATO. By contributing to European security, Canada gained immense political capital and a seat at a very important table. According to diplomatic sources familiar with the ongoing talks, Canada and the EU have been rapidly accelerating negotiations on a host of economic fronts that go far beyond defense. The groundwork laid by the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, is now being built upon at an accelerated pace. They are drafting frameworks for new energy partnerships to help Europe reduce its reliance on other sources, creating secure supply chains for critical minerals essential for the green transition, and fostering deep collaborations in the technology sector, from artificial intelligence to quantum computing. The strategic genius of this European gambit lies in its timing and symbolism. While the Trump administration was demanding that Canadian citizens be fingerprinted to enter the United States, a measure typically reserved for non-allied nations, Prime Minister Mark Carney was in Brussels being welcomed as an equal partner. The contrast was stark and deliberate, showcasing a choice between a relationship of suspicion and one of mutual respect. But Canada's diversification strategy has a second, equally important front, a deliberate and accelerated pivot toward the dynamic economies of the Asia-Pacific region. This isn't a new idea, but the urgency is. Ottawa is leveraging its membership in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, a trade bloc the U.S. famously abandoned. While the Trump administration has been engaged in a chaotic and unpredictable trade policy with Asia, Canada has been methodically strengthening its relationships with key Pacific partners like Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. The goal is to become a reliable supplier of the food, energy, and resources that these rapidly growing economies need. This pivot is not just theoretical, it is yielding concrete results. In the years following the initial tariff shocks, Canadian exports to Europe surged by 22%. Exports to Africa, a continent of burgeoning new markets, were up 18%. And trade with Central and South America grew by a respectable 11%. These numbers represent billions of dollars in new, diversified revenue streams. This external diversification is mirrored by an equally critical internal strategy. Under Prime Minister Carney's leadership, the Canadian government has been aggressively working to eliminate its own internal trade barriers between provinces, an archaic system that, for decades, made it easier for a business in Ontario to trade with Texas than with Alberta. This internal focus is complemented by the search for new suppliers, a quiet but revolutionary shift in Canadian business practices. For generations, the default for Canadian procurement managers was to simply source from the US. Now, that assumption is being challenged in boardrooms across the country. When an American president openly muses about annexing your country, it forces a company's board of directors to ask some hard questions. The most important one being, is our supply chain too dependent on a single, unreliable partner? The answer, for many, has been a resounding yes. This newfound resolve was on full display when Canada's finance minister felt confident enough to publicly and forcefully state that 70% of retaliatory tariffs against the US remained in place. This wasn't a bluff. It is the action of a country that has done the math, diversified its options, and concluded it can afford to fight back. While Trump was tweeting threats, Carney and his team were quietly building the economic resilience to withstand them. They were not just weathering a storm. They were fundamentally redesigning the ship, creating a post-American economy for itself. This strategic shift is the single most important economic story in Canada today, and its effects will be felt for decades to come. By late 2025, the battle lines over North American trade were drawn. The most devastating evidence that Trump had lost control of the narrative came in early December, when the U.S. Trade Representative held mandatory hearings in Washington. The subject, the 6-year review of the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or CUSMA, as it's known in the U.S. This review, a mechanism Trump himself had championed, was now becoming a referendum on his entire trade policy. What unfolded over 3 full days was an unprecedented rebellion from the heart of American capitalism. Nearly 150 American business leaders, industry groups, and trade experts testified. From agriculture to advanced manufacturing, from small businesses to Fortune 500 giants, the message was unified and desperate. Almost every single one of them begged the Trump administration not to destroy the very trade agreement he had once called the best in history. Riley Bushew, vice president of the Northwest Horticultural Council, which represents apple, pear, and cherry growers, told the hearing that retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico had already crippled his sector's exports. He explained that these weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they were family farms facing foreclosure. Then he issued a stark warning.
There are no other export market opportunities capable of offsetting the severe economic losses if we lose preferential access to Mexico and Canada.
And they're not alone. Dave Walton, secretary of the American Soybean Association, warned that U.S. soybean farmers will end up in the crosshairs of any trade dispute, a lesson they learned painfully during Trump's first term. The American Automotive Policy Council, representing the Detroit Three, argued that vehicles and parts should be exempt from Trump's new tariffs because the integrated supply chain was the entire basis of the deal Trump himself negotiated. The pleas came from every corner of the economy. During a break in the hearings, Trump was asked directly about the future of CUSMA and the overwhelming testimony against his position. His response was brief and dismissive. He said the United States would either let the agreement expire or, quote, work out a different, much better deal. Let it expire. The landmark trade agreement he spent his first term negotiating, the one he held up as a signature achievement, he's now casually suggesting might just be allowed to die. For the business leaders who had just laid their fears bare, it was a stunning rejection. According to sources familiar with the administration's internal discussions, there's significant and growing concern among Trump's own economic advisors. The fear is that he doesn't fully grasp the catastrophic, cascading consequences of CUSMA collapsing. They worry he sees trade as a simple win-loss transaction, not the deeply integrated economic ecosystem it has become over 30 years. Take the auto industry. A single car part might cross the US-Canada-Mexico border 3, 4, even 7 times before being assembled into a final vehicle. Every time it crosses under Trump's new tariff regime, it gets hit with another 25% tax. The math is simple and brutal. It's not a one-time cost. It's a compounding disaster that makes North American manufacturing instantly uncompetitive. If CUSMA expires, or if Trump's tariffs remain in place, American manufacturers simply can't compete. The cost of a new American-made car could skyrocket by thousands of dollars overnight. Production lines would halt, and factories would close. This isn't a theoretical risk. Canadian and Mexican companies, seeing the writing on the wall, will be forced to find other partners and re-engineer their supply chains to cut the US out entirely. The United States doesn't just risk future business, it loses immediate access to $1.6 trillion in annual frictionless trade that millions of American jobs depend on. So what happens on July 1st, 2026? That is the deadline for the 3 countries to confirm their intent to extend the agreement. The honest answer is that it depends entirely on whether President Trump understands what he's about to lose, and whether he cares. If Trump continues his current path of escalating tariffs and dismissive rhetoric, then Mark Carney walks into that CUSMA review meeting holding all the cards. Carney can credibly threaten to walk away from the agreement because he has spent the last year building alternatives, new trade deals with Europe and Asia, and a domestic economy being weaned off its US dependency. What does Trump have? A coalition of his own country's business leaders begging him to stop, and a negotiating position with no leverage. July 1st, 2026 is the point of no return. Trump has until then to decide whether he wants to save the trade deal he spent his first term creating, or whether he'd rather watch Canada and Mexico walk away, taking $1.6 trillion in annual trade and decades of North American partnership with them. It's a choice between preserving an economic powerhouse or blowing it up out of spite. Based on everything he's done so far and the voices he chooses to ignore, he appears to be choosing the latter.